Hello, everyone. This is Sheikh Jalal Ahmed from Fat Cat Motorsports, and I have on the phone Chris, who is a new FCM Elite customer, and Chris is a very custom, very special Mazda RX-8 with a V8. And is it, Chris? Is it an LS motor, or is that right?
Right. That's correct. Right now, it is an LS motor out of approximately a 2002 Chevy truck, and it only has 5.3 liters of displacement, but unfortunately it's an iron. Yeah.
Okay. Right.
It's an iron block right now, but I do have an aluminum engine waiting to go in it, so it should be about 100 pounds lighter on the front end.
Right. Oh, that makes sense, because I noticed that your weight distribution, when you sent me the images of the corner weights, it was about 54% front, so it's going to shift a little bit less, right? Almost 55.
That's correct.
Cool, awesome. So if you don't mind, do you mind just telling people, like, how did you find me? What was your process of getting introduced?
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, I knew that I was interested in pretty much an RX-8. I've had a rotary RX-8 for previously to this one. I was able to sell that one, and I pretty much wanted a car that I could commute approximately 30 miles to work in. And I wanted also to be able to use this car pretty much a competitive autocross vehicle. And so I knew that I was interested in something that had relatively decent gas mileage, so I was looking for about 30 miles to the gallon, rode well, had 4 seats, but I couldn't figure out how I was going to have something that performed well with about 200 more pounds on the front end and buy something off the shelf, buy a suspension system off the shelf and have this work. I felt they'd probably have a lot of understeering problems. So, thankfully, Fat Cat Motorsports provided other RX-8 systems to other customers that have rotary engines, but when they were talking about the customer service and pretty much the consultation that you were able to do with them beforehand, I thought, well, maybe we can make this work. And then after I just had a brief inquiry online with you, and you got in contact with me, and you were able to show me the development with your spreadsheet you had, ride rate, motion ratios, track width, everything for the RX-8 suspension. I thought, this is certainly the option I want to go with. I'm not buying something off the shelf. He knows the geometry of the suspension. And we went from there. And so pretty much the way I found you is through the RX-8 forums and their outstanding reviews of Fat Cat Motorsports.
Great. Cool.
And,
And so, I mean, what is your, before you had, was it the factory non-R3, or what was your suspension before?
Yeah, so this is a 2004 Sport model.
Okay.
So it had the non-R3 suspension, obviously.
Okay.
Because I think the R3 was introduced in 2009 with the Bilstein suspension.
Okay.
But but still, you were able to help me out with figuring out how can I get Bilsteins on the vehicle, because I really wasn't familiar. So you're even willing to help me find the used suspension, and you actually found the used suspension.
Yep.
For me, yeah.
Yeah.
It was a reasonable cost, and we went from there.
Right. Right. Yeah, and
very important. A lot of the stuff wasn't. I wasn't able to do it as quickly or really grasp it as quickly. So it really helped.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I mean, that's one of the things that I think when people approach builds for anything, if you don't do it all the time, you don't always have access to the resources to do things quickly. It'll take longer. You might do it, but it could take you longer.
That's exactly
right. And that's
exactly right.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why when I came to a point of, making my prices what it needed to be comfortable with the amount of time and attention I put in, which isn't just, oh, I'm at the desk making the shock. It's the research, the testing, the analysis, the how much does the front need, how much does the rear need, how do I balance the two? I mean, all the things I think about, it's like all these moving parts. And I put time into it. Like you said, it's not off the shelf. Nothing's off the shelf with me, you know.
Yeah.
And also, even if you had a regular RX-8 without the added weight and power of the of the V8 motor, the LS motor, I still do custom builds because there are so many pieces that need to be optimized. You know.
Yes.
So you can't see right. Go ahead. What were you gonna say?
Yes, and I was going to kind of mention our discussion previously about just having a different sway bar on the front end.
Right.
You know, you're going to buy an off-the-shelf coilover system that isn't considering your entire, you know, every single other component of the vehicle. It's not really optimized.
Right.
And with your service, the customer is able to fully optimize at least the shocks, the springs from there with what they've already got.
Yes. And then, like you said, the sway bar, the alignment, driving styles, you know, because all of that matters. So, and right now you do have the stock sway still, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
The only thing that's been changed is I went to a stock NC Miata rear sway bar due to your recommendation.
Okay.
And that's honestly the only other suspension modification.
Cool. And so, because when you sent me the photos, you sent me the 2 batches of photos today, and the first photo I saw, which was of the car in roll, I mean, I was like, wow, there's a decent amount of body roll still. But then I was remembering, oh yeah, you still have the stock front bar. You know.
That's exactly right. Those I thought I'd send you those photos from before. And that is with the LS engine, you know, 200 tread wear tires, but stock suspension.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I don't have stock suspension totally. That was before. That was in September.
Yes.
And I got your suspension in the end of October.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
So I just thought that was a funny picture to show. You know, this is what the car was doing.
Right.
This is what it was doing.
Okay.
And hopefully soon I can provide some pictures of what it's doing now.
Okay.
But,
yeah. And so you do have a photo. So well, this is a photo now on the screen I have of the coilovers installed. So this is before, after the event, obviously, but you know it's in there. So that's great. Yes. Awesome. And so yeah, I mean, I was just looking at the engine pics. I mean, it's a beautiful. Your car's beautiful, and it's a sleeper. I mean, it is.
Yes. Yes. And that's what I kind of enjoy that. I don't know. It's always an element of surprise. I think everybody enjoys, and this car is just another one. So
Yes.
A lot of people enjoy it.
Yes. And so now what's interesting is, you know, when we were talking, and I've already been developing the what I call the three secrets to creating ride harmony. And I did I share that with you in that way when we spoke, or would I? Do you recall?
Yes.
I did. Okay, good. Because that's like my message to people, and this is a message. It's not just about enthusiasts; it's about anyone, and especially when you talk to high performance oriented. A lot of people just think you just need to stiffen the springs, and you need to make the front springs stiff enough to make the car handle right, and But that introduces problems. That causes pitch, right? And so we spoke about that. And so you knew that flat ride was beneficial, and we ran the numbers, and you knew that the factory suspension has it, and you understood and agreed that we needed to keep that for your build, and so we did.
Yes.
Can you feel that happening? Can you? What do you?
I guess really what I feel happening is the car now. Previously, it was really before it used to have a lot of understeer, but other than that, I feel like the car was planted. But the other problem with the car, other than understeer, is the transitions were extremely poor. And so anyways, but in order to get that responsiveness and really, I felt like in order to get the responsiveness and the understeer worked out, it was kind of above my head, other than taking years to figure it out and really get it correct. But really, I guess some of the things that I feel are, one, it has much more responsiveness. Two, it has zero, I guess it's not understeer bias any longer. But I think that can be achieved with, if you're not, it's just putting a coilover setup on a car. But one thing that could be achieved is being streetable and at the limit, not having the car just totally lose control or totally oversteer and spin.
Okay.
And I have had the utmost confidence in this car. With having 300 plus horsepower and torque in a car that really I haven't driven much is very surprising. Yep. It's very surprising for me to get in the vehicle for the second time, take it to a competition, and not spin it. Not spin it once. And I was able to place maybe 2 to 3 seconds behind a Porsche 918, I believe it was.
Oh.
Yep. A new Porsche 918, I think it was.
Wow.
With a T3.
Okay.
Yep.
Wow.
So, and this person has been autocrossing for, I think, 15 to 20 years.
Okay.
Right. So, but if you do my index time, now, if you considered my index time, that's another story.
Well, yeah. But you're comparing two powerful cars with, and then you're looking at driver and, obviously some setup differences, but it's still, it's indicative of your capability, you and the car's capability and the suspension.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I would consider my capability, especially at this time, very, very low compared to most autocross drivers.
Well,
I thought that spoke a lot on the suspension.
Right.
That's what my thought was.
Yeah, and that's really good to hear. I mean, a couple things come to mind as you say that, because knowing that you have all that power, I purposely wanted to have your front roll couple, the measure of the balance of the car, be a little bit higher than stock, because stock is around 64 or 63%, and I wanted yours to be like around 66 or so, or 68, something like that. And you already softened the rear bar from the standard RX-8 to the NC, And did you? I mean, I know you made the setup change too, but how do you feel the car puts power down now? Is it any different? What do you notice?
I think it is different actually, because with the soft stock suspension at the first autocross event I went to, I did have a lot of oversteer problems, and I had to be careful. And on a stock suspension, that's kind of surprising. I feel that's surprising. But now we increase the spring rates, and I would say we have a more firm suspension, obviously, but Fat Cat Motorsports set up, but we softened the rear bar, the suspension's been optimized, and now the car is balanced to where I didn't have any oversteer problem, and if the car was starting to oversteer on me, I would say that's more of a driver's problem.
Okay.
And another thing is when I was having a little bit of oversteer, I never had problems snapping on me, the car never became unsettled. So I definitely felt that it put the power down better than what the stock suspension.
Okay. And yeah, and what's interesting too is that actually the low speed damping on the rear is, and I have the graph on screen, so when you have time to watch the video when I upload it, you'll see the dyno graphs that I'm showing. And the front is the rear low speed is actually softer with our setup, just a little bit softer. You know, yeah. I mean, it's still firm, but it's not. So if I look at the percentages, it's like around 45% of critical at 1 inch, 53 at 2, and 59 or 60 at 3 inches, which is not. It's not wallowy soft. I mean, some people might consider that underdamped, but I actually feel that it's. I was expecting it to be adequately damped, and it sounds like it is.
Yes, I feel that it is because I mean, we're going through the transitions. It's still very planted. The balance of the car. You would notice that it has. I think it has approximately 200 to 300 more pounds on the front than a stock vehicle does.
Good.
It still feels balanced, and I'm not running a staggered tire setup either.
Good.
So I think that speaks a lot to suspension.
Awesome. And yeah, because I know, and we chose, long enough springs. That's another part of the whole custom build. You're using an 8-inch spring front and rear, and a reasonable rate. The front's a 450, the rear's a 375. And you get 1.8 hertz front, two rear. So I mean, right around that. Yeah, and then the bump stops are. Go ahead. What?
Yeah, and with those spring rates, when you first recommended those spring rates, I didn't say anything, but I was a little nervous. Like, man, I think that spring rate's 2 to 3 times.
Factory. Yep.
Yeah. And at that time I was thinking, well, I'm not very familiar with coilovers. I wonder how this is going to go. And utmost surprise. Very surprised. It felt similar to my friend's stock BMW suspension.
Nice. Well, and something that I realized before I even ever imagined I'd get into suspension tuning, and we're at 18 minutes, so I'm just acknowledging that we probably want to. I would want to respect that timing. But before I even got into shock tuning, I had measured and realized how much of a factor the bump stops are with the factory suspension, and stock springs. So essentially what I did is I took the stock bump stop and incorporated some of that spring rate, used it in the mainspring, and then made sure that we kept flat ride, and then used a much softer and shorter front bump stop, because the front bump stop's like 36 millimeter red. That's what the note that I have, versus the factory was like, I think 68 millimeter, or 70 millimeter white, right. So you're really not using the front bump stops unless you're in a really hard corner or a big bump.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
And I wondered, too, if I haven't really I don't know if I've really hit those bump stops yet, because I feel that maybe the suspension is gradually letting me touch the bump stops. But with that OEM suspension, it would snap.
Yeah.
I would hit the bump stops. Once I did hit the bump stops, it wasn't predictable.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the interesting thing about, what I found is in so many cases we can use a soft, short bump stop, especially up front, where in most cases cars would want to use the bump stop and terminal understeer, and if we just soften it and shorten it, and then we can use a stiff enough spring that you're going to not get into bump stops except in, like you said, big bumps kind of thing, or a little bit in hard cornering. And another thing that I did, and I'm just going to mention it in the video just so people can see it, is that when I did kind of a tune so that when I look at the rebound and compression, the front has a little bit, it's just right over 1-to-1. It's like 1.1 to 1 rebound to compression. And the rear is about the same. It's just a little bit less. It's like 1.03. So I have the values will be on screen. But I chose those values intentionally to minimize the amount of jacking down, but for stability's sake, with the power you have, to add a little bit more front rebound on a bigger bump, on a higher speed bump.
I see. That makes sense to me too. Because when you are in high speed, you don't really want to be throwing that weight around if you didn't have much rebound.
Right.
You're trying to you're losing I guess weight transfer to that tire sometimes too quickly.
Yeah, or you're overloading it. Yes, you might overload it. And so yeah, because of the amount of power, and I wanted you to have confidence using your throttle more than you did before. I did add that little bit of extra front rebound bias, where with a car that's say stock power or has generally more of the linear power curve like the stock motor, I would probably add a little bit more rear rebound bias to keep the car from wanting to rotate. You know, but your right foot lets you rotate the car almost at will, pretty much.
Yes, because I guess kind of what you're saying is I'm able to get the weight on those tires.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, yes, and to do it in a smooth way, that's the other interesting thing. I mean, what's really funny is that I have your front dynos on the screen now, and we have similar compression to the factory Tokiko, assuming that that's the same shock you have on there, but our compression has a better blow-off. I mean, it's still digressive. You have the stage 2 setup, not stage 3, but I tuned it to have lower high-speed compression, and it's lower than the factory Tokiko, which is interesting.
Yeah. I had no idea about the stock damping.
Right, and we hadn't talked about it, but I just pulled it up for our conversation.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very interesting that, I mean, the rebound is a little bit firmer. It's definitely firmer than factory, but again, it's intentionally and intelligently firmer, just slightly proportionally firmer than the rear. So I know there's a lot of shocks out there that are a lot stiffer than these. I mean, and let me know when you got to go, Chris, because I don't want to keep you.
Yeah, no worries. No worries. I'm enjoying the conversation.
Awesome.
I was thinking, yeah. I mean,
Great.
Why not understand more and learn more about the suspension that's on my vehicle?
Right.
Really the consultation process that we had earlier, I felt, just because of my business travel, was an extreme convenience for me.
Yep.
And the product that came out of that was incredible.
Well.
And at that time, I wasn't really able to talk through the details with you, so I'm thoroughly enjoying learning more about it.
Very cool.
And I'm thankful that you did consider having the dampening, pretty much having the dampening in a way less than the OEM suspension, because it doesn't. If it's the OEM suspension, and just because it damped a little bit less than OEM suspension, doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's going to be set up for the particular chassis setup that's on the vehicle.
Yes.
And there again, that's why I went with you. I've ridden in vehicles with coilover suspension that is $400, and I've ridden in vehicles with $2,000 coilover suspension. I've never really been pleased. Never really been pleased. And actually, both of those owners were able to ride in my car, and were surprised about its street manners. They weren't able to. One of them has an IS 300 with a 2JZ, I believe it's a GTE engine in it.
Okay.
And he does time attacks with that vehicle. And I'm not familiar with what coilover suspension he has in it, but it's fairly planted on the street. But I feel in a way that it's kind of over damped. Anyway, the street manners on that car, you really have to be careful in it, and you definitely really don't have much traction as far as having fun on the street. And he says it does pretty well on the track, but and then obviously that $400 coilover suspension is really just for looks.
Yeah.
So obviously that one's horrible ride quality.
Yeah. They don't have to. I mean, it's interesting that both those cases don't necessarily have to be lacking, and that's part of my continued outreach, and it's really why I share these videos and this information, is because as I tell people, and I'll just say it again, I can't tune every suspension in the world for every car to make it right, to my estimation of right, or my estimation of the best that is possible to make it the best comfort, the best grip. They're synergies, they're synonymous in so many ways. And it also makes the car feel less sporty. It doesn't feel as jumpy, bumpy, and you might think, oh, is this really faster? Is this better? But then you can, I mean, you probably know what I'm saying. It doesn't feel as jarring maybe even as the factory did in some ways. Is that true? Yeah?
And since I haven't got to drive the car much, I've driven a lot on the street, but at a circuit or on an autocross track, I've only driven it twice on autocross, none on an actual track or circuit. But I think you're right in saying that, because it goes back to me not having much experience in this car, and I wasn't even close to spinning it. I wasn't close to spinning it. The understeer was actually due to my pretty much braking too late in some of these turns. So it was incredibly balanced. Never had any dramatic oversteer, understeer moments. And I feel like if it was a twitchy car, maybe too much spring or whatever, I feel like I would have had, I would have had more cones. I actually hit none at all.
Cool. Well, that means that you can push harder next time, and then once you clip one, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Exactly.
And that's the thing that I love, and I've heard and I felt myself, is that the ability to be consistent and to push the car and have it give you feedback that you can immediately adapt to without it being, oh my God, what just happened, kind of thing. Right? It's forgiving. It's forgiving and fast. It's not like it's slow and forgiving. It's capable and forgiving. Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think really that feedback that the car gives someone is really important. Really, really important.
Yeah.
As far as pushing it to that limit.
Yeah.
You don't understand when the limit's coming. You could just go over the edge, or you never reach it.
Yeah.
So having that feedback, I think, is really one of the most important parts of the driving dynamics of the vehicle.
And because I'm always thinking in terms of these. It's interesting because the sense of feedback. A lot of probably both of those coilovers you mentioned. I assume they're both monotube, probably, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
So, and I'm going to link to the upper part of the screen to my spring versus damper test, and probably some other videos where I talked about the influence of the gas pressure in the damper, especially on the monotube. And that's something that it gets really overlooked, because even right now when I'm showing the dyno graphs, they're all going through zero, but I know that every damper has some gas force in it, and it raises the curve. It shifts it upward, which means in real life you're getting this immediate resistance from the gas force that that the suspension has to transfer enough load to overcome and start the damper moving. And ideally you want zero. If you can run a damper with none, then great. But in most cases, if you don't have an expensive, fancy through rod system, which they have in high level, various racing series are available, you need to minimize it. The goal seems to be to get the most grip, the most consistency, the less additional spring rate from the gas pressure, the gas spring, is to minimize the gas pressure and to minimize the gas force. And normal Bilsteins generally come with 45-50 pounds of gas force in like your application on a double wishbone type double wishbone multi-link setup, and your dampers only have about 28 pounds of gas force in the front, 28 and 23, and in the rear it's 23 and 18. And I'm just going to put the dynos, I'm going to put the hysteresis curves on the screen, and I also want to talk about conies too, because this goes into the something about, because those are very popular. But so I have the hysteresis of the rear and one of the fronts. I think I have both rears. Let me just put both of them on there. Yeah, the hysteresis on both the rears is really nice and tight. It just looks really good. And then I'll put the fronts up as well. And that's what I can do with Ripple Reducer. So you have Ripple Reducer on your setup. And that just mutes, it filters out the road. That's the design of it. It's meant to filter out road noise. And I don't know,
Yeah.
can you feel like on rough surfaces, do you notice how the car feels compared to before on like just a marbled or rough surface? Like?
Yeah, so before I thought the suspension was, I mean, it was very, it didn't really communicate well as far as, I mean, the response was bad.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as, what feedback is it giving me? Is it giving me a little bit of understeer? Am I gonna have oversteer soon?
Mm-hmm.
All that was pretty poor. So really, the road feel of that suspension was just kind of muted, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a particular stretch of road that's in construction right now. I wasn't driving through road construction, but they were just working on this one side of the road, and they just finished it. And they actually poured some of the pavement, not, if you will, level with the next pavement coming up, if you will. So there's a little bit of a transition to each one of these pavement pieces, if you will. And before you'd feel the car pitch back and forth, up in the front, and then obviously you feel the back of it pitch. And then after that, it kind of settle out. But with this ripple reducer, you don't really feel the front of the vehicle pitch up really quick. I don't know if that's really what's going on, but as far as when I hit some of those transitions, the car isn't pitching really quick.
Okay.
And so I'm not really sure if that's what I'm feeling or not, but
I think it's part of
I have noticed on that stretch of road, the car isn't pitching back and forth as much.
Okay. Okay. And the things that I could say is that the leading edge of any part, the benefit of ripple reducer, there's two, is that the damper simply wants to open more smoothly with less resistance. That's the key feature. And you notice that the most on smaller rises, I mean, especially on a higher frequency, repeated small oscillation. But even on the initial opening of any movement, that the ripple reducer does soften that initial rise. Because you give, yeah, and also, so that's the leading edge of it. You will definitely feel the softening because I can run less gas pressure, and it essentially reduces the friction in the system, and that's what you would feel on that leading edge of a bump is the initial stiction, to make it want to respond and then compress. So
I see, because really it has to overcome that friction, and then you get into the
Exactly. Then you get into the actual shock damping as opposed to just the gas and then just the seal friction. Right. Right. There's a lot of manufacturers will talk about how they do go to all these great lengths to reduce the seal friction, and some popular names that are out there, monotube aftermarket vendors will say, oh, we have these fancy seals and this and that. But then they have this really high gas force, and I think they probably may not even fully understand why they have this feeling of friction when it is really the gas force that's causing a lot more problems than just valve friction, than just the piston band or something, and it kind of makes me smile because I'm like, well, if you just, if you address this and incorporate this, you wouldn't need to try to make it better. And honestly, from what I've seen is most vendors don't seem to be using something like that. Maybe a few are starting to. I think some are starting to put like a single hole, or some of them have that, But then the other problem is the piston design. If they're using a linear piston, which actually leads me into, at least Bilstein from the factory doesn't use a linear piston. But interestingly, your factory Tokiko, so I'm just going to kind of show OEM versus Tokiko, and you'll see this. So actually, no, your Tokiko is digressive on compression and rebound, or it was, the factory front. But the front did have more compression, or does have more compression with the factory suspension. And you're going to notice more of that kind of kick upward as you go over a sharp feature. And that's also what I mean is that even though we went with a higher spring rate, the front damping is softer on compression, high speed especially, mid and high speed. And then the rebound curves almost look the same. It's funny, I didn't consult the Tokiko curve, but the rebound up to 2 inches per second is almost exactly the same as the Tokiko factory. But then it continues a little bit more, and then it blows off because I need it to give enough control with the stiffer spring. So it feels like the factory might have been over damped on compression to begin with. That's one thing I could say. And it's actually something I noticed with the ND Miata when I did the graphs, and I'll just point to the corner. When I did the 2016 ND Miata, the front has a lot of compression damping built into it, which it makes the car more reactive. I said the 2016, and they may have changed it for 2019. I made a video talking about that. I mean, I generally like how Mazda does a lot of their suspension tuning, but I'll just point out when I notice something, and your feedback is really interesting. Because the dyno now is pointing directly to what you observed. You know.
Yeah, that's good to know that I'm not fibbing over here.
No, and that's what we always. I think that's one of the things about. I mean, you have a background in engineering, right? Mechanical, is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I just wanted to make sure I knew that, and you made allusion to you could do it yourself potentially, but you could take you a while, you know.
Right.
I mean, I'm coming to this as a physics guy. You know, I'm just I'm a mad scientist, which gives me license to explore and test and question, and it's even better in a way that I didn't come from mechanical engineering, because I would probably feel like I needed to follow a certain sequence, and I've had to discover my own methods and my own analyses, but then also to tie it into things that I know exist. Like, there was a great comment a guy on a Truth About Cars article made, who was a mechanical engineer also, and he talked about the change in dynamic set point. You know, that the damper, because of any bias in the control, the compression and rebound, that causes a change in the dynamic set point of the system. You know, when you have the resistance, compression and rebound, the two aspects. And then he said that would explain why jacking down actually does occur. It's not someone's imagination. If you have too much rebound, you get jacking down. If you have too much compression, you get launching up, or that feeling. And that's why I'm so mindful of, and I have like a calculation which was assisted by one of my colleagues and a fellow Miata enthusiast way back when, where I calculate the maximum compression force that I can use for a given corner weight, and that is incorporated in these designs.
I see.
Yeah, and I can actually, we can talk about that offline more sometime if you want, but I've alluded to it in some videos where I talk about my method. I think it was when I made the Envisioning the Perfect Ride video, which was like 2 videos that were really long. I don't know if you saw those or not.
I didn't see those.
Okay, but
I'm gonna have to look those up though.
Sure, I'll reference it in the video too. So if you re-listen to it, then the card will be in the corner. You can click on it.
Okay.
Because I revealed a secret that I'd kept to myself ever since I got deep into suspension tuning, and but I noticed that like Bilstein and Volkswagen both seem to understand that there was a level of compression force you could use and you did not want to exceed generally. Because if you do beyond a certain shock velocity, now you've built up so much compression that you are lifting the car, that corner of the car up, due to the shock reactive, the impulse from that force, and yeah.
And I kind of understand that, because now if you have too much compression damping in like one corner of the car, now, wouldn't that almost lead to traction loss in that tire?
It would.
Sometimes?
Absolutely it would. No question. Yes.
Yep. And that's, another thing. I didn't want to just be getting a hold of somebody and saying, okay, these are the springs you're going to get. This is how we're going to damp the shock. This is how we're going to valve your shock, just based on the spring. I was really worried about that. And there weren't many options of that I could go with, especially with the Mazda RX-8. It was either that I was going to get a racing level suspension that wasn't going to be compliant on the road, but would do well, be well suited for an autocross or well suited for a track day, or I was going to get a bolt-on coilover system that probably would have done fine, but again, I probably would have had problems on the road, and it probably wouldn't have been compliant, and I think I still would have had understeering issues.
Yeah.
And again, at the limit, depending on the dampening on those suspensions, who knows what feedback I would have gotten. And we haven't even touched on 2 things yet. Is one, the customer service, as far as understanding my intended use, which no other manufacturer would have done. The customer service I'd say with you is probably 100 times better. and
Thank you.
and two, the quality of the suspension. Like you've mentioned before, I could probably use this suspension and not have it rebuilt for another, 80,000 miles. And that's unheard of with any off-the-shelf coilover. Unheard of.
It's paradigm shattering.
Yeah. I don't know. Like I think you mentioned before, at some Owens coilovers, they want you to have them at least looked over every 10,000 miles.
Or I think it was 24. That was what I recall hearing. Yeah.
So,
but that's still.
With somebody, I will be working and servicing, working on my own car, servicing my own car. But as far as me shipping, my entire suspension off every 24,000 miles, that's probably a week or two that I don't get to enjoy the car.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe at that point when I get it back, I have to go through the corner balancing process and whatnot.
Right.
And then I might even have to have an alignment again after that. So
you don't. Yeah. It's definitely an inconvenience. I mean, the good thing about the double wishbone is that you could mark bolts and things in some cases, but it's still an inconvenience to be recommended to do that. Whether or not people do, it's often recommended, or they say for best results, or for optimal performance, and blah blah blah. And to me, it's like, okay, I understand, and they have a service department, like an active service department, because it's, in a way, it makes sense. It's a mechanical device, or it's a device that may need service. It's not a throwaway cell phone, single use these days, where you can't service anything on it. You just get a new one, And I kind of object to that model of single use, and disposability. That's just, I'm an environmentally conscious person as much as I can be. That was my intended major when I went to college. I never thought I'd get into semiconductors and then cars and biomedical and then start a company. So I'm like, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do it in a way that makes me feel environmentally responsible, and I'm thinking about my customers' well-being. Because I also knew what it was like to have machines go down for people overseas, in Japan, Korea, even domestically, and then the poor customer service guy, the field service engineers calling me at 2 a.m. from Korea. Oh shoot, the machine's down and my customer's mad, and what can we do? I'm like, well, I guess they probably needed to test that system more thoroughly at the factory, which I kind of knew, but the sales guys are like, just ship it. We need to get it out the door because we have a deadline. Just ship it. And I'm like, this is madness, I just didn't want to go through that. And so that's why, and I as I tell people, I never would have done this if the Bilstein durability wasn't something I had read about, heard about, and experienced, that I could make something and have it be used for as long as possible and then be refreshed and refurbished and serviced if needed. And that would hopefully be a long interval.
Yes.
So.
Yes, and that was... that was probably the third highest reason that I consider the Fat Cat Motorsports product. But I think that is really something people should consider if they're going to thoroughly enjoy their car, even if it's a track vehicle. Why do you want to be sending your suspension off? Why? I mean, is having X brand name worth it for you to not go to the track for, 2 weekends ahead because they just have to look at your seals, or they just have to check and put on a shock dyno,
Right.
Why not have the confidence that you could avoid that for at least 4 times longer, if you will? Yeah. So if a Bilstein is going to last 4 times longer, why not?
And that's really, and because this does come down to a level of perception, of expectation, where everything about racing has to be more inconvenient. Everything has to be more expensive, less reliable, or less durable, or need more frequent use. And to some extent, yes, brake pads, rotors, engine oil, tires, right? All these things are expected to be, frequently maintained or changed. But is it the case that it needs to be more, like the shocks have to be sent in more frequently because you need to have a valve on them? You have to change the nitrogen pressure because supposedly it's a benefit to increase it? Oh my God, really, people? Okay. I'm on a mission. I mean, but that I've had to learn. I didn't know coming into this. I had the same expectations, the same understanding based on other people's retelling of what does it mean to be an enthusiast and what do you need to do when you're designing an enthusiast suspension. It has to have these things. It has to have a knob. I mean, at least
You're right, the knob,
yeah, you need at least one, and you're even cooler and faster if you have two. You know.
Oh yeah, I love that.
I know. Like you may not know what the knobs are doing, but damn it, you need knobs.
Turn them.
Yeah, just turn them. It'll make it better. And if you aren't fast enough, then it's because you didn't know how to use those knobs right. But that's the psychology, right? And oh my God.
Yes, it is.
Then you get the reservoir. Oh yeah, the reservoir. That makes everything better, even better. You know, and whatever. But people like, what about the frequencies of the front and rear suspension? Does that matter? You know, what about the compression and rebound? How does that affect things? What does jacking down mean? What does launching up mean? How do you think about the bump stops? Are you looking at the stiffness and the length of them, front and rear? You know, or are you looking at the gas pressure? Like these 5 questions, 5, 6, but they all relate to those 3 principles. They're all components of those 3 secrets of creating ride harmony. And once you do that, you've got a pretty, I like to say, sublime. My goal is to create something that's surprisingly capable in every dimension. You know, I mean, how close did I come for you? How close have I come for you so far?
I think that, you know, this is my first coilover suspension that I personally owned. But I have ridden in a lot of other vehicles with coilover suspension. You know, and when I say coilovers, I'm just saying aftermarket, bolt-on, spring shock assembly. So anyway, by far, this is the most compliant street vehicle with an aftermarket suspension that I've ridden in. So I think you definitely nailed that for me. And then the other thing is, the car makes me look like a good driver, and I know I'm not. I have went back-to-back with other drivers in vehicles and been 10% slower, 10 to 15% slower.
Okay.
And so you know, earlier when I alluded to the most recent autocross I was in, and I was, you know, I said 3 to 4 seconds behind a Porsche. When I say 3 to 4 seconds, that's 10% slower again. You know, but we're talking about somebody with 15 to 20 years of autocross experience on me, and we're talking about somebody that has a vehicle that is pretty well set up from the factory. It's more than 300 horsepower vehicle. It's less weight than my vehicle, but about the same amount of power. You know, so. The car makes me look like a good driver. And it's still not optimized. And when I say not optimized, I'm alluding to the brakes. I'm alluding to the engine. I'm not alluding to the suspension. So if a car can look balanced, feel smooth on a track, and to me, I think that's a big deal. I really do.
Yes. I mean, you have confidence. Go ahead. I'm listening. Go ahead.
And so, as far as meeting my expectations, my expectations beforehand, I really had no idea what I was getting into. But I've ridden in other vehicles with coilover suspension. I was not happy. But it's amazing that the car makes me look like a well-balanced driver. And on the street, I'm totally comfortable with driving it. My wife now, she's driven Corollas her whole life, and I asked her when we were riding in this car on the interstate, hitting those bumps I alluded to her, I talked about earlier. I said, "Would you mind going on a road trip to me? You know, a 400 or 500 mile road trip to Wisconsin and back?" She said, "Yeah, no problem." Really? I mean, you feel like this is a comfortable car? Yeah, no problem. And to someone who has no performance experience saying that. I think that speaks for itself as well.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy. I think the research. I'm thankful that I was just. I'm thankful for the internet. I'm thankful I was able to find you. I'm glad I made the choice I did. I think a lot of people just want to click buy it now on the internet
Yeah.
and have something show up in a week.
Yeah.
I think I think that's kind of the culture we're in right now. But I think a lot of people have went through multiple coilover suspensions because of that decision to buy it now, do this, and get it in a week, bolt it on, and you're not happy. So I think it's unavoidable with a custom setup like this. You have to have a little bit of lead time. There has to be a development process, but I am very glad I made this decision. And I'm excited for the year to come and to really just enjoy the car.
Yes. Yes. Fantastic, Chris. And
Everything I was looking for.
Well, you're great. That is exactly what I don't know if I promised you. I because you knew there was no knob and you could change height, but you couldn't change damping, and
Yeah, and I was worried about that. It's funny to think back about our initial conversation because I said, now I know that you don't use knobs, but what if I wanted to take it for a track day? What if I wanted to drive it on the street the next day?
I remember.
I said, do I need to have this revalved for different events or what? And you said, no, don't worry about it. I think you'll be very happy with the setup. And I said, well, but it also has a different engine in it. It's not balanced like a regular vehicle, a regular RX-8. I said, what, are you, I also asked, are you interested in looking at this? And he said, I think I'm very interested in looking at it, but he said, I also think you'll be more than pleased with the setup. And not only have I been pleased, but everybody else has been in my car also. It's very pleasing.
Fantastic. I mean, yeah. And the thing that I think one thing that comes to mind is when I was reflecting on how the shocks in some ways are softer, in certain aspects. And in fact, that you've increased the spring rates far above what the factory had, but compared to the factory shocks, in some characteristics, these shocks are softer, or no stiffer in similar ways, which applies that first principle of Ride Harmony, which is make the springs work for you, make the chassis want to stabilize and settle, and then add as little damping as you need to control those springs and those oscillations and those motions. And it's from that standpoint of understanding that the car is this beautiful platform that we're sitting in. If you're going by yourself, or you and your wife and having friends, whoever would be joining you, that you're trusting your car to carry you to wherever you want to go, and to be comfortable and to be responsive. That you have confidence steering, braking, gas, getting around things, not just cones, but, things on the road, and stopping. Being able to stop and keep the tires in contact as you're slowing down, emergency stops. And so I think of all these things, and I keep thinking the art of minimization. It's easy you can do a lot by adding stiffness and adding control, but the art is in finding the least that's necessary. And I won't take credit for I didn't invent that concept, but I've had enough experience with overly stiffly revalved shocks and setups I've driven and tested in cars I've ridden in. It's like, is this really the best way? Is this really what's needed for best lap times? Or do I have to suffer to have a decent street ride? Or can a decent street ride not perform well? I mean, is that really the case, or is that just a misconception? And so every person who trusts me and has the verified existing track record, and then each time I have this experience where I go through the process, because it's also why I charge for consulting, because I want to have the time and listen and interact, so I understand your questions, your concerns, because they're the same ones any reasonable person would have. I expect questions. Yeah.
And really quick, I wanted to touch on your consultation. The fee for a consultation is certainly worth it, because it takes, the consultation you had with me, I think, was over an hour and a half, and it wasn't a waste of time. It wasn't a waste of my time either. But in order for someone to take an hour and a half out of their day that is running a business, that's a big deal. And I did not take that lightly.
I know. Thank you.
I really think it was worth it.
Yes.
And I think it would be worth it for any future customer.
Yeah. And Thank you, Chris. Because I also know that as I've told you and I've been saying for years, even before we met, and just that I want to give people some ideas that as I understand things and continue to apply them. I want to understand the physics of harmonizing your ride. That's what I've been doing, and so every person is a living experiment. You know, this is the best that I could do with what I knew at the time, and so here it is, and tell me what you think, and then I get feedback, and I do my own testing, I do my own reading and research, or inspiration comes, an idea comes, and then it's like, okay, here's the next refinement, and at this point, I feel very comfortable with these 3 things. I mean, if you give someone a list of 10 things, their eyes are going to glaze over, you know?
Yeah.
I know that. You know, like top 3 lists, top 5, I mean, top 10 lists are okay if you're spending 2 sentences, 3 sentences talking about the blah, blah, blah. Or if it's a magazine article, top 10 cars of the year, you want to sit down and look at that. But you're not going to be asked to do a lot of deep analysis. You're being kind of entertained or you know, just shown something cool. But if you're trying to get people to think and you want them to consider and look at something from a way they've never seen it before, I knew I had to make it simple. It had to be as focused and targeted a message as possible. And I've been testing out this 3 principles, the 3 key secrets, the secrets of ride harmony. And I see, like, you know, every time I do this, whether it's for pure street or for dual purpose or for track, the same principles apply, the same ones apply. You know, so my message going forward is I can't reach every single person on the planet, and it's not my intention to try to. I don't want to make a company to build shocks for everybody. It's when customers are more informed and aware, and the next person you talk to who's talking about getting coilovers, I'm going to be making a video, or you can send them to a playlist that says, watch these videos from Fat Cat, and if you go to somebody else, whoever you go to, these are the questions you need to ask. Ask about the frequencies. Ask, okay, these are the springs you recommend. What are the frequencies? Am I going to have flat ride? Because I know flat ride works. I learned about it. It makes sense to me. I want flat ride in my setup. Can you design that for me? You know, can you make sure that it's not jacking down or launching up too much? How do you choose the compression based on my weight, the car weight, etc.? Here's some tools, and I'm going to be creating more spreadsheets that people can use for free. Like, there are RX-8 spreadsheets. It's out there. I already have the RX-8 spreadsheet, you know?
And it's all free. Like you're mentioning, all this information you're giving away to people so they can learn.
Yes. Because
you're not withholding it.
No. I mean, I keep enough as I need to, but it's whenever the turning point was. I mean, my dad, when my dad was alive, he worked as a military contractor, and he had to keep secrets. And he couldn't tell us a lot of what he did. And that was, I think, frustrating for him. And in a way, I had to do that when I first started. I didn't share dynos. I didn't send them to any customers. I would tell them about what it was doing, but I wouldn't show them because I was worried about people stealing my secrets. And then I realized, like, if that's the mentality I have, I'm going to be stuck doing this for the rest of my life. That's one thing that I felt would be the case. I didn't want to feel stuck. I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this from a place of love and deeper understanding, because I know there's still things I need to learn. And if I share with a customer who maybe has a mechanical engineering background, and I can talk about concepts and they can help me understand something, I'm going to improve what I'm doing. And you know, that was a transition point when I said I need to share so that I can continue to learn, and people just have even more confidence that I'm doing something that makes sense, and they can question it. Does this make sense? Why are you doing this? Why are you not doing this? You know. So.
Yes. And I'm hoping to be able to give you even more feedback next year, because the car will be, you know, I think it'll be more suited. The brakes will be better. You know, the brakes, the engine. And I was even having a little bit of clutch problems at one of the events. So. I'm more excited to really push this car and really get better feedback soon. But it's amazing that, you know, those areas I mentioned, brakes, engine, even a little bit of the clutch, are still not 100%. And I'm being able to pretty much utilize the car how I am, and actually competing at some of these events was not expected. I'll say.
Cool.
Wasn't expected.
Yeah. You're experiencing ride harmony to the fullest extent that I'm able to give you, and you can feel it.
And I feel blessed. I really do feel blessed that you are willing to the customer service, that you're willing to talk through it with the customers and me. I'm very lucky. Feel very lucky.
Thank you, Chris. So am I. That feels like a good place to stop the formal video. So I'll go ahead and turn it off, and then we can finish up just one-on-one.